Today, we're going to be talking about the best decks going into the format, but we are going straight rogue. That means we're excluding Shizu tier, Bestial Sprites, Wonderies, Bestial Thunders, or any Bestial decks in general, and Naturia. Now that I'm looking at the list again, these are some of the best budget decks of the format as well. So today, I got for you guys the best rogue and budget decks of the format. Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and welcome to MST.TV. In today's video, of course, we're going to be covering the best rogue and budget options going into 2022's format. And trust me guys, if I manage to win with these decks against meta decks, I'm sure you guys can too. And I've also lost against some of these decks using the meta, so they've got a lot of potential. And thanks to their low price point, it does make it very accessible for everyone to kind of pick up. Especially for those who want to add a little bit more deck variance in this meta pool. Number one... can we actually rearrange the numbers a little bit? Because I don't want to push this deck as the first deck. You guys know how much I feel about that. Okay. Number 1, Madolche Verniself is Shizu. So unfortunately, I don't have any gameplay footage for you guys on this deck, but that's alright because it's already proven its success at YCS Dortmund by none other than Herman Hansen, which top 32'd on this deck. And yeah, by the way, huge fan guys, go follow him on Twitter, which is Misteltine yugioh. So I'm just giving credit where credit is due here. Now about the price point, I know what you guys are saying. Tom, this deck looks hella expensive, you got 3 Fenrirs in there. Okay, fair point, but we can cut the Fenrirs out, and that would cut 60% of the cost out. That's right, 60% of the entire cost of this deck is within 3 cards, which is pretty standard in Yu-Gi-Oh terms, but you can cut them out. And looking at the deck size here, it is above 40, so cutting them out, replacing with something or replacing it with just one thing would also be possible. So, but in terms of the rest of the price point of the deck is mainly being contributed by the Flourishing Hills, the Magnamuts, and I would say the 1 copy of Zeus and the 1 copy of Access Code. And we're going with the lowest price of Access Code, which is about $27 last I checked. So yeah, by the way, this is not a market watch segment, so I can't guarantee you these prices, but still it's on the more expensive side because you do have stuff in the main deck that are relatively higher in cost per copy, such as $10. But enough about the price point. What about the deck itself? This deck takes advantage of the Earth Fairy synergy coming from the Verniself, acting as a generic Earth Fairy engine. This would normally strictly lock you into Earth-based monster effects, however this deck is built around that. Madolche cards are Earth, the Shizu cards are Earth, and therefore they just work together perfectly, creating a very good rank 4 spam deck. The Madolches, if they're known for anything, they're quick to build boards and they can break boards like nothing. And they can also push for an OTK thanks to their ability to stack Xyz cards very, very easily. And with all the extra level 4 bodies, you can get access to Abyss Dweller and use it on the turn that matters most during your opponent's turn. And with the rest of the deck's tuning, yeah, it's ready to combat the meta. Number 2, oh god, Dice FTK. Dice Verniself Telephone FTK. Yes, this is an FTK, and normally I do not like to promote an FTK during a format, but hey, it's a tier 0 format, so the gloves are off, and this is surprisingly not the menace of the format, but it does convert the game into a die roll. Not only you die roll to see who goes first and who basically gets to win the match, you get to die roll your way into a victory thanks to Morphtronic Telephone, Dice Dungeon, and Dimension Dice. There's 3 different ways that you can kill your opponent. You can gain infinite life because you play Dark Ruler no more to crack the board, but since you can't deal damage, you play the burn combo strictly to gain infinite life so that they can no longer hurt you, and you're the one that's never gonna die or deck out because you play Shizu cards to shuffle your stuff back. And you don't really need to burn through your deck that much. You can even speed up their demise with some of the Shizu other mill cards if you need to. And preferably, you would like to mill cards because you play Amazoness Archer as your burn card. You can revive these cards from the graveyard, which is great because you can go into Crosshi plus the Fusion Trish, and boom, you get to revive yourself the Amazoness Archer. And as long as you can cycle your telephones, you're good to go. And of course, the final way to kill your opponent aside from burning them to death is going to be attacking for game. You have infinite monster generation, lane climbing is going to be an easy thing. Now this deck is based off of making several meta calls here. One, they're immune to Bestials because you're playing Earth, that's why you're using Amazoness Archer. If Bestials weren't in the format, we would have easily pivoted to Cannon Soldier, which would have required you less resources. However, Cannon Soldier, if it gets milled, it's likely going to get banished by a Bestial card, kind of ruining your chances of tributing off your own monster. But that's besides the point. The other thing is going to be Ash, Valor, Imperm. They're not really in the meta main decks. which gives you an easy access to FTK somewhat, especially when you win the die roll. And on top of that, this deck is fairly cheap, about $80 or so with the entire package. This is one of those decks where I'm really scared of the pros playing it, because if they fine-tune the deck to the point where this is the pattern of winning, even if they lose a die roll, game 1, they scoop it up, they don't tell you what they're playing, so you don't really know how to side against them, but then they FTK you game 2, and then game 3, instead of going for the infinite kill combo and burning to death, they go for the infinite life combo. They Dark Rule no more, stun your whole board out, and just go for the infinite life gain, making you play an uphill battle, and they just shuffle cards back. Now, on top of that, I want to put one more note out. Aside from the deck being really cheap, some of you guys might be wondering, like, hey, you have an Amazon as Archer. Don't you need like all 3 copies of Telephone and access to use it? The answer is no, you don't. Sure, that's one way to guarantee the kill, but the other way to do it is to use 2 copies of Link Rebo and 1 Relinquish Anima and 2 copies of the Shuffle Backs, and you get to cycle the entire combo with more than enough damage to kill your opponent. And I've tested this out myself. You guys can see it in that demo on the side right there. So yes, just be very aware that this is very much going to be one thing that converts the meta into a die roll situation. And if you're sick of the meta, this is probably one way you can burn down that meta, quite literally. Number 3, Dark World 2.0. Okay, despite the fact that, hey, there is a lot of Bestial cards in the format, Abyss Dweller is commonly made, we have a Shizu cards, we've got D-Fissure now back to 3, Macrocosmos back to 3, D-Shifter also being a very popular card in Flunderies, why is this deck still good? First of all, its price point, it's only $126, that's my average on a full deck with the extra deck including Access Code and Photon Lord included. That is ridiculously cheap for a competitive ready deck at this level. The key feature why this deck is still good regardless of all the anti-graveyard stuff is that they aren't really once per turn. They're summoning from the graveyard. They can happen as many times as possible. That's great. They don't even activate. A lot of the graveyard effects are just not once per turn. It makes it very difficult for your opponent to play unless they go Dweller first. But even if they do Dweller first, you can still put up a bunch of big beefy monsters because the summons, they don't activate. They're just free bodies. But I would say Dweller still hurts the most because it turns off your danger effects, which is your natural way of cracking boards. And getting an FTK with this deck, not FTK, OTK with this deck is really easy. Now, how do you identify whether or not you've won the game already? One, if you resolve Coach King Giant Trainer, drew 3 cards with it, the game's more or less done. Unless you're really bad and you really fumble the closure of the game, then, well, I guess you deserve to lose that game anyway. The other way you can win is you hand loop them at least once with Silver, making them start with 4 cards or even less. The game's over. They can't come back. Grapha is way too strong. Even if you get Dark Ruler on your entire board, you have the Quick Play Fusion spell that just puts up a new Grapha back onto the field. They're not playing either way because they're not taking damage and they're probably about to lose even more cards in their hand. So this deck has a lot going for it, and even if you're stunned out from using your extra deck, that's fine. All your monsters are naturally super beefy and a lot of cards activate in the graveyard, especially your popping effects with Grapha, your Bigfoots, your Thunderbirds. It's just so much gas in this deck that you won't lose. And lucky for us, Droll and Logbird is not in the format, but this might be the one deck that would push Droll back into the format just to handle this deck because it just over searches. Just not once per turn search is one of the reasons why this deck could get killed. So I highly recommend playing this deck, and I got a deck profile coming up tomorrow, which is why I'm not sharing with you guys my current deck profile, but this is the one deck build that I had a ton of replays. Basically, my entire computer is made up of these replays so far about how Dark World just breaks people apart. Whether or not I'm locked out, even under Flunderies for some reason, you can activate a quick card destruction and just crack the entire board. It's really silly. But yes, I got a deck profile for you guys, and at this price point, absolutely worth it. And yeah, 3 structure deck covers 29 cards of the main deck and several cards in the extra deck. I'm just saying it's a really, really good deal. Number 4, Brigade Bird Up. This deck is back from the deck thanks to the release of 3 Tenkeys and 2 Recital Starling, and at a discounted price of $130 or so. This includes the triple tax and includes the access code and the DD Crows and the Ghost Bells and the Appaloosa. You can't really say that back during when this deck was meta. That was nowhere close to the current price point. And this deck is extremely powerful. Now, certain things have been adjusted. This entire list on the right here, that's just kind of adjusted from the last list I had from yugioh Pro. But there are some changes. One being the Cerberol. You guys listed in the comment section of the damage report, hey, play Cerberol, and you guys weren't the only ones. A friend from my locals told me, hey, you should play the Cerberol. I'm like, why? It's because you want to create Herald of the Arclight to force banishing, and you'll have enough disruption, and it's also a card that removes itself so that you can use Revolt and still get to Shureg without locking out your own positioning. I'm like, okay, you know what, that's fair. And then I looked at the deck list again. I shoved in some Bystials, and then I took out all the Bystials, realizing, oh my god, if I play Bystials, I can't use Turquoise Warbler. And if I can't use Warbler, the whole combo is dead, so that's why we stuck with DD Crows. And DD Crows are searchable thanks to Recital Starling. So yeah, there's a lot going for it. So if you have multiple cards within the opening combo, then one of your search options would be the DD Crow to stun out the Shizu fusion play. So that's really important. You can also go for Zeus plays very easily. So this deck is just ridiculously cheap for what it's capable of doing. So I'm going to show you guys the combo here. This is from what I remember from back in the day, and just kind of integrating just a few minor things to ensure that we can get to the Herald of the Arclight. But what I kind of want to add while, you know, the combo is going off is that I want to figure out whether or not I should use Utopic Draco Future and use a Sprite Elf to protect it from targeting and just bypass Appaloosa altogether. That's one of my considerations. And would that give me access to different lines like going into IP Masquerena instead? But ultimately, the end board, I still want to get a Herald of the Arclight on the field, because forcing my opponent to banish stuff from the graveyard, especially monsters that would have been sent to the graveyard, getting them banished is fantastic. It shuts down the Shizu card, and being able to protect it from battle through the use of a bounce, thanks to the Double Dragon Lords, is great. As for the last two positions here, I really want to know whether or not it is worth it for me to actually grab the Revolt or should go into Ensemble Blue Robin. These are all just different things I want to consider, whether or not it's worth it to play. And this is just kind of my line right now. I'm pretty sure most people would have done the same line anyway. It's just a fairly common line, and it's just really readapted from the past. So yeah, nothing too complicated. So the end board somewhat looks like this, and I think the Herald plus the Double Dragon Lords, those guys can remove themselves from the field. And if you actually notice it within the combo, that both the Bearbrum and the Farigit were summoned normally. So if you do want to use the Revolt can just use 2 monsters and still get you to Shureg to give you the additional banish. About 5 disruptions or so with the 2 cards. It's pretty insane. And before I close out this video, I want to give a couple of honorable mentions. Pendulums, they had some success. Runics are still going to be one of the more annoying decks, especially if you guys don't know how to deal with them. And if you're going to be playing a rogue deck, Runics can chew up a lot of rogue decks. And then there's also Kashtira. This is post-December, but not post-Hypernova. Yes, they're still very strong, but they don't fit in this list because it's just too expensive. With the 3 Fenrirs, that's going to be not exactly the best bang for your buck right now. But if you're planning to play Hypernova, then you might as well get used to the basic level combos of the deck anyway, because with the 3D fissures, 3D shifters, it's as annoying as Fuwanderees, but you know, without the stigma of, you know, locking people summoning out of their decks. So it's a little easier for people to deal with, but if you rip away their Kikalos, they're still gonna feel it just as much. All right, so these are 3 of the decks. If your deck isn't mentioned, you can leave it down in the comment section, see whether or not it's good enough. And if it's part of those meta decks I mentioned earlier, just don't post. All right, that's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and don't forget to check out the Dark World profile coming up today or tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. And I'll see you guys in the next one.